Hello, everyone. Welcome to our sixth webinar. Building on the foundation laid in previous seasons, this series continues to explore the critical role of smart technologies in energy management. Earlier seasons delve into topics such as multi-utility, integration, smart city development, and regulatory frameworks, providing a comprehensive view of the smart metering ecosystem. Can experience from various smart meter rollouts in Europe be used in Africa? In today's webinar, we will try to discuss pros and cons of those insights to Africa's unique challenges and opportunities, highlighting how Europe's experiences can help form strategies for implementing robust, scalable, and sustainable smart metering solutions across the continent. Join us to uncover how lessons from Europe can accelerate Africa's energy transformation. So please welcome our guest, Mr. Daniel Bungey from World Energy Council, Mr. Shawn Papi from ESKOM, and Mr. Klemen Belec from DLMS.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us today. I will now start with questions for our guests, and I would like to encourage the audience to ask questions during this webinar. So first question, what do you think, how can government, utilities, and international partners accelerate large-scale smart metering rollouts and ensure widespread adoption across Africa? Daniel, you are a future energy leader at World Energy Council and the past recipient of the Young Energy Professional Award for Sub-Saharan Africa. So what is your opinion regarding this question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jovan, and thank you for convening us to this very important topic on smart metering as it enables improvement of performance, especially for utilities, and how it connects to the overall development of infrastructure in Africa. I think as a young energy leader and having had a stint in the space of smart metering in Africa, it presents a very huge opportunity for improving performance for utilities, which majority of in Africa, I think except only two, have any positives in their balance sheets. And majorly resulting from heavy losses from technical and commercial losses. As governments have a huge responsibility to address this. A substantial number of utilities in Africa are state-owned, and therefore the influence of government is quite strong. And the opportunity that government has is to have in place clear regulatory frameworks and policies that would support development of rollouts of smart metering systems, and connecting that especially to national development plans. I think there's an opportunity for countries that are building different components of their physical infrastructure to connect that to the development of smart metering infrastructure. If you're looking at building a digital superhighway, how do you connect that to the metering element? So I think government has a huge role on that. The international community has a very strong element also. It's connected to some of the reforms, even historically, have been driven by international development partners, including the World Bank. If you look at the reforms that happened in the 90s, they came from largely influenced by the development institutions. They have a role to play in terms of using their power in funding, using their power in convening best practices, and fostering technology sharing to drive smart metering adoption. And also, especially on a collaborative front between governments and these development partners, that will really enable the uptake of smart metering systems, especially in the African continent.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Shawn, can you add anything on this question?
Yeah, Thanks, Jovan. I think government have a very important role in this, in that they set the legislative agenda not only for their countries but also on the continent. So I think if the smart metering technology itself can be seen as an enabler for economies, for utilities across the continent, and also just for protecting revenue streams of important institutions like electricity utilities, I think that is motivation enough for governments to put forward regulations, I think similar to what Europe has done with the M441 mandate some few years ago, which resulted in large populations of smart meters being rolled out in France and so forth. So I think governments in Africa can take the same approach and provide the regulatory instruments that allow the accelerated deployment of smart meters. And I think where the international partners may come in is they would then provide the expertise, the knowledge to ensure that we do not reinvent the wheel in cases where it's not necessary. And also, I think, enable the adoption of state-of-the-art technologies that has already been deployed in other international environments and adapt those to the African continent. So I think the collaboration between those two entities would greatly assist in pushing forward the technology on the continent. Yeah, thanks, Jovan.
Okay, thanks, Shawn. Klemen, what is your view?
Yeah, a lot has been said from my predecessors, a lot already, so I don't want to repeat. Definitely, I also see the government as the main driver. What additionally I would mention is the funding. This is what we see usually coming into the one or the other country in Africa, that if you can assure funds to fund the project while the rollout of the project, this of course brings a lot of benefits and sometimes even enable the smart metering in a particular country. The second one was already mentioned, but I need to repeat. Yes, definitely we don't want to reinvent the wheel. And here I have very high hopes because I know that the local regulatory associations in Africa, they are already working with us, for example, in DLMS, and the specification and the profiles are harmonized, and probably they will be taken for the forthcoming rollouts in Africa, with the awareness that there are some specifics which we need to respect, that Africa has additional, let's say, set of standards defining the STS prepaid meter, but I still believe that a lot of best practices can be harvested from European Union or wider, also based on the experience with one or the other technology, understanding what is available in one or the other country in terms of connectivity, in terms of availability to transfer the data from the device to the center, and this is actually the package which can push the smart metering forward in Africa. And definitely this will have a positive impact on the economy and evolution of every country that will go for it.
Okay, thank you, Klemen. So Klemen mentioned DLMS and standards and cooperation on this field. So we can continue with the next question. How do you think the regional adaptation of international standards, like the prepayment functionality in Africa, could influence the global development and adoption of smart metering technologies. And first, I would like to ask Shawn. Shawn is a very experienced expert in smart metering in Africa and also chair of ASEC Technical Committee 13. So, Shawn.
Yeah. Thanks, Jovan. I think the one thing that is certain is that there are standards that covers mostly most of the use cases that are also applicable to Africa. And I think there's just a few unique functionalities or use cases like prepayment that you've mentioned that have a long history in Africa that have not been integrated previously with technologies such as DLMS COSM. And I think the foundation has already been laid. What we then do from an African perspective is just build on top of what has already been there. And I think the approach would be more than the defining the technology. It's more clearly defining the prepayment requirements, for example. There's also a big drive for fraud detection, theft detection, those type of use cases, and taking those and adapting them to the standards that exist at this point in time. And also, what I like about following a standards-based approach is that you simply just adapt what you need according to what already exists, ensuring backward compatibility. So I think standards have a very, very central role in ensuring that, firstly, Africa builds a baseline for smart metering technology and then customizes that for the African continent as well. And I think even within the continent as well, there might be different requirements and use cases within the country, within the continent itself. But if we follow the basics and the rules that have been set in the standard, I think we can build common solutions that will enable us to take advantage of economies of scale, for instance, and take advantage of what has already been working all along. And I think in terms of us having unified standards on the continent will help us to put our case as Africa forward in forums such as the DLMS UA and also the IEC as well. And that will help us to really influence the standards in the direction that will cater for the African needs. So we need to participate more and we need to document well the use cases that apply to the continent itself.
Okay, thanks, Shawn. Klemen, maybe you can continue.
Yeah, I can only add and maybe just make it also sound and clear that the new ACSM profile, which was recently created and released in DLMS, it was developed also in cooperation with Shawn, especially working on the prepayment part, which means that we are already creating those, I would say, common standards, profiles, and grounds to help Africa also to go on this part of smart metering. And I believe now, while the profile is already released, we will see the certification in place in roughly half a year, which will give also all the African countries the ability to test the devices coming from vendors against the new profile and also taking care of the interoperability. At the same time, they will have the positive benefit on the overall cost of the project because us vendors will again have a larger volume, not a specific product variant for a certain market, but we will be able to harvest based on the larger volumes and quantities produced for multiple markets. Yeah, this definitely is the right way to go. And again, I'm happy that we are already cooperating with the AppSec and creating a profile which will serve multiple regions and continents.
Okay, thank you, Klemen. Daniel, do you have to add anything?
No, I think lots been said, but just layering that with the fact that yes, standards an appeal, especially in terms of uptake and success of any innovation per se, as to ride on already what is sort of a common way or a common what people are used to. In East Africa, the prepayment system riding on mobile integration, famously like M-Pesa, like using like your phone to pay your bill, is very prevalent, and therefore, as standards are being developed, as being evolved either at the regional level, even by regulatory bodies in different countries, is to see how that would be taken into account, because this is what the masses are used to, and this is what would really support the scale in terms of uptake, and really also looking at how that plays along in terms of minimizing cost of development in leveraging what is already quite prevalent and existing. So I thought that would also be another dimension to bring on board.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. Okay, maybe we can continue with the next question regarding communication technology. So what do you think are the key factors that will drive the adoption of new technologies like MB-IoT in African smart metering systems? Klemen, you are a chairman of DLMS technical board, and you have a lot of experience in smart metering in Europe. So maybe we can first hear your opinion.
Yeah, if we are talking about the communication technologies, I will connect my answer a bit to the previous question, where it was already said that fraud is one of the challenges that Africa needs to overcome as well. I would say in Europe, we are not immune to this as well. And we see that if you are creating your meter, a smart meter that is connected to some central system, you increase a lot from functional perspective, the ways how you can detect fraud or even measure the percentage or identify the potential areas or meters where fraud is happening. So this is one important aspect why you would want to evolve from a standalone meter to a smart connected meter. But from the technology perspective, I would say the technologies nowadays are various, from narrowband IoT to LTE-M to classical LTE, even the LTE BIS, which is the stripped down classical Cat 1. There's a lot of tech available, but it drills down to the very point for what you need to, or for what you want to use your technology for. So there's a big difference if you want to use the communication channel for billing purposes only, just to collect, retrieve the data, or maybe in the case of prepaid meters to download the credits to the meter. And there's a huge difference if you would like to use this data for advanced monitoring of your grid conditions, or maybe even try to monitor some voltage or current thresholds. I think Africa is not there yet, at least not the majority of the countries. So we are looking at this moving from the classical STS prepaid into the more smart metering with more rich feature set, but it will take probably some years to have the need for near real-time data and advanced power quality features if you want, or something more.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Klemen. Daniel.
So I think communication technology options that especially low power and have the reliability are critical, especially in the African context, because most of the remote areas or rural areas are quite sparsely populated, and it's what is currently some of the key priorities of government in terms of investment, to look at how to support rural electrification, and a lot of private sector involvement in developing mini grids. And some of these mini grids, of course, have different limitations in terms of power, in terms of reliability. I think looking at options and technology options and standards that are able to operate within such dynamics is important, and ensuring that also it comes with the right supporting mechanisms in terms of standards that are able to balance functionality and cost, because there's a lot of cost sensitivity to at what cost do you deliver a certain technology, looking at all these constraints. I think that's also an important aspect that we looked into, and BIoT, LoRaWAN, and some of these low power range technologies have a really critical opportunity to support in terms of deployment of smart metering systems, especially with the rural populations of Africa.
Okay, Shawn, can you add anything?
Yeah, Jovan, I think it was Daniel earlier who mentioned technologies like M-Pesa. Those payment technologies payment services are delivered over public cell phone networks. So that gives me some hope that at least with the expansion of those services, the public cellular networks are also expanding. And then if you also look at the number of smartphones that are being utilized on the African continent, that also tells you that the more smartphones there are, there's also a growth in the connectivity in that area. So I think even though not entirely the whole continent, but I think there is opportunity to take advantage of those cell phone network technologies that are there. I think I've heard previously that the 4G base stations are basically the foundation for NB-IoT, for instance. So if 4G is available and we're moving towards 5G in certain areas, I think it presents an opportunity for us to integrate that same communication channel or communication media to transport metering data across the continent. And I think with COVID in South Africa, for instance, in other countries on the continent, people were forced to work from home. And I think in doing that, somehow that worked at an advantage to strengthen some of the communication media that's available there. So I think the flexibility of the communication technologies that are standardized for meters should allow for integration of future technologies or even present technologies that we have not started using at this point in time. So I think where there is connectivity available, definitely one can take advantage of that and transport metering data over those channels. And of course, there is also space for use cases to grow. But once the foundational connectivity is available, I think we can only then grow from there. But fundamentally, I think we must look at it as an opportunity to take advantage of connectivity that is available for other services that are on the continent as well. And I think this is where learnings from Europe may come in. Also, the strength of standardization must also be used to ensure that even if we build small, but we build it in such a way that we can continue to expand upon the technology itself. Yeah. So I for one have seen potential of NB-IoT. I think in various use cases. It's just that we are yet to see it grow. But I think there is potential there. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I think that Klemen want to add something. Or...
Yes.
Yeah, just a short comment. Yeah, I think there will be one positive thing for African grounds, and this is that the evolution of mobile networks were a bit late, or it happened later than in Europe. So definitely you will not need to deal with the fallbacks, which we still have in Europe. For example, the primary technology 4G and fallback to 2G, because you have de facto 4G networks. I think the majority of the networks currently is 4G, and it's more question which technology will prevail from the question how the mobile operators will see it, which technology they will push, they will strategically push and make the monthly subscription more appealing. Is this going to be narrowband or IoT or LTE Cat1 bis? Let's see, but definitely will go in this direction that you will start with 4G. You will be able to avoid the 2G fallbacks. LoRa was mentioned. Yes, LoRa could be a very good technology, but I would be very cautious by using LoRa for smart metering purposes, because it is standardized, but it's not the mainstream, and the further evolution maybe is a bit problematic because of the downstream. Not the upstream is perfect, but the downstream, the image upgrades or any traffic that it's going from the center down to the meter, it's very limited.
Okay, the discussion about communication technologies is always interesting. But now I would like to thank to the audience. We have the question, but please be patient to finish with the questions, and then we will continue with the question from the audience. Okay, so we mentioned that from one side we need standardization, from the other side we have a continuous development, always some new innovation, new technologies. And question is, how can African utilities find a balance between regulatory standardization and fostering innovation, particularly in rural areas? Daniel, maybe you can first give your opinion.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the point I mentioned earlier, which is as regulatory regimes and standards should really focus on striking the right balance between functionality and cost, and addressing some of the unique needs of some of the areas that are underserved or not served with electricity access in Africa. And I think it is important for utilities, even as they influence through the associations and the power they have, and most of them, especially central utilities, a very strong connection to government and government policy, is around being able to really provide clarity or really be very specific on functionalities that need to be addressed, so that they don't need to to ask for a lot that is needed. And I think also being able to be open to innovation and thinking around what should we address, what should we be focused on, should be concerned about billing data, consumption data for customers, privacy, and all that. But making sure that is open, so that the people who come in, the private sector and the designers of meters, have the flexibility to explore how to address these needs in the most, I'd say, in the most optimal cost way, so that we maintain the cost of a meter low. And I say this because when you see most of the utilities and how they spec out their tenders, and even for meters that would be used in very remote areas, where you look at the use case, is quite basic in a way, I would say, basic in quotes, because I wouldn't expect in a rural area where already there's still issues with connectivity, issues with even access to technology, even access to even physical infrastructure, that you would want to have a device that has an home area network capability, for instance. But devices will be connected within the home. So I think having that open-mindedness and being careful in the choice of features and balancing that with the needs of these areas is very important for the private utility, for the public utilities to consider.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Shawn, maybe you can continue.
Yeah, it's a very important balance that we need to have. But for me, standards must just provide common building blocks. That's all that standards must provide for us. Just like Lego blocks, for example. Then you can take the blocks that you need to build a big solution as you need, or as small a solution that would require. So the standards must be so generic that they allow for you to build any solution that you require without hindering innovation. And then innovation will be driven from specific needs that we come across. And of course, rural Africa, Europe, and the US, totally different environments. The question that we must ask ourselves is, what are the needs that we need to address? Once that is clearly defined, then we extract from the standard building blocks that are provided by standardization to implement that. So one can have a very sophisticated device deployed somewhere in the high end. And in the same country, you might have a lower scale implementation based on the same standard, using the same platform, using the same communication network. So I think the standards must provide as many options as possible in a way that is governed by the same rules, so that whatever you build is compatible to whatever else is needed within the system itself, so that you may have a cohesive solution. One thing for certain is that we must be clear on what the requirements are for rural customers, for instance, and what the requirements are for those who are in the city, and then implement solutions that are particular to those spaces. And if I'll go back to the issue around communication media, we then, the metering technology does not have to introduce new communication media. The question is, what is already available in those rural spaces, and how can we then tap into it and innovate to bring very cost-effective solutions in those areas. So both strong standardization is needed, and also a clear set of requirements is needed. And I think in that way, we'll be able to innovate and find the balance that we need. With the absence of regulations comes the absence of standards as well, because regulatory will then enable us to follow a common set of standards. And I think those two are key in us bringing down the cost of deploying smart metering technology in an innovative way.
Okay, yeah. Very interesting explanation. Let's say multi-practical and flexible standards.
Yeah.
Klemen, can you add something on this? Is it possible?
Yeah, I can give only one practical example, which will prove what Shawn just said. We've been talking about the densely populated areas, the cities. Here, we are talking about the grid solution, and there's no doubt we need to follow standards because other ways, and this is, by the way, quite an important one, we might get out of support after several years. And if one or the other vendor will discontinue to support the rollout, or will be able, or lose the ability to support during the lifetime of the meter sitting in the network, we need to have the possibility to easily exchange the one product with another one within the interoperability standards. And this should be done in a simple way without any big modification. But if we are talking about the rural areas where we might see an off-grid closed systems, I think for the sake of innovation, we can allow ourselves a bit more of openness, even allow some proprietary solution to connect maybe the PV, the battery, the smart meters, and I don't know, the diesel generator to run this closed system, especially if we know that for a long time this system will not be connected to the grid. But again, I would say the same as in the city areas, the importance of the utilities would be to assure themselves that after 5 years of operation, even in case of this off-grid system, they will have spare parts, they will have the maintenance available so that they do not run into the situation where the system will be constructed, set by one or the other company. It will run for 3 years, and then one piece of this system will fail, and the whole system will be off from this very day onwards. This is something what we've seen before, and it should be prevented.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you. So we can continue with the next question. How can financial and technical partnerships help in advancing smart metering projects across Africa? If you have any representative example for this, please mention. Shawn, maybe you can first start.
Yeah, I think finance is quite a big enabler because, of course, you pay for the engineering for one, you pay for the products that is put down. So I think it's one aspect that is important, and in every solution that we are seeking to build, that's a clear consideration. And I think if we looking at standard solutions, we looking at agreement across the continent, I think it would be easier to motivate for investment to come this way. In terms of technical partnerships, I've been for years monitoring the way a lot of technologies developed. It was mainly through collaboration. You could look at the GSM technology area, you could look at Bluetooth, you could look at any other technology. The main drive, the main impetus behind the technology growing and becoming a de facto technology was mainly collaboration. So I think where we need to strive to establish partnerships, especially with those who've already gone through what we are trying to do from a technical perspective. I think they are very, very key, those partnerships, in assisting to develop technology and also in making sure that we have tight business cases that can enable us to get financing for the different projects. At this point, I don't have an example. Perhaps my other colleagues might have one. Yeah.
Okay. So, Klemen, can you continue?
I agree what Shawn said. Financing might come from global banks, local banks, from vendors, or investment funds from the other region. This is usually the driver, how the smart metering rollout starts, and there's nothing new here. On the specification and product design, maybe what we've learned in European Union is that the countries that try to define the whole specification on their own or based a customized specification based on default one, for example, taking DLMS as a base, but creating a lot of customized features on the meters, not paying attention what is happening across the border in neighboring countries. Nowadays, they struggle or they are trying to get back to the base of the meter because they are a bit hit with the economy of scale. Also, the fact that vendors cannot support all the specifics in each and every market, and sometimes it's not even wise because they might went into the branch which leads to a dead end. The electrical energy segment is now developing very fast with all the distributed energy resources. The standards are evolving also in Europe. As we speak, we are now defining within the umbrella of European Union the new standards to define the communication and data exchange for flexibility and demand response purposes. So my advice here would be work with vendors because they have a global view because they are working in multiple countries. Probably a good advice is also work with multiple vendors because one or the other vendor might try to push you on one or the other direction, and this will lead you to the right specification, also the cost-effective one.
Okay. Thank you. And Daniel, if you have to add something.
Yeah, I think just emphasizing the need for financial supporting mechanisms, especially for utilities in Africa to advance smart metering. Majority of the utilities in Africa are struggling to even recover the operational expenditure and depend a lot on subsidy from government and loans from different development partners. I think looking at how that can be addressed through some of the things that probably have worked in addressing the energy access element, like the results-based financing models, and looking how that can be used and applied into the smart metering regime. Exploring partnerships with vendors, with suppliers. I think Klemen has brought out that so quite well. And I think an example, not a perfect one, but a good example that I've seen explode is in Nigeria, where there is the meter asset provider model, where utilities work with specific private companies to come in to finance and install smart meters, and then they recover their costs over the operational expenditure savings from the utilities on a tariff basis. I think those are quite unique options and models that allow utilities to have that flexibility of their balance sheets because they are quite stretched even to cover the operational expenditures, let alone even support existing infrastructure to work and provide reliable power, and now talk about expansion with integration of technology. So I think that it's important that such collaborations and innovative partnerships are explored.
Okay, so some kind of public-private partnership, if I understand. Very interesting. Okay, and we come to our last question. So we know that Africa is a very specific continent and that there are regions in Africa without energy infrastructure. So what impact do you think connected smart meters could have on energy access and affordability in African communities? Klemen, maybe you can start.
Yes, I think it will not have only impact on the access to energy, but to the whole economy. So what we've seen global-wise is that electricity nowadays is a major driver for standard increase in the country. So I would say having the smart metering projects implemented in a country definitely will bring some rules, some structure, and also some transparency in energy consumption, if you like. It will, when we've been speaking before, you know, that the energy fraud and stealing the energy is also a challenge. Introducing of a smart meter in the region with the good connectivity, with good advanced features of detecting fraud will also create some fairness among the community and try to catch those ones stealing the energy and praise the ones who are already paying for what has been consumed from their side. And from technology perspective, it's not so important whether we will have a prepaid connected meters or European smart meters or the postpaid meters. It's the same. It's more important that we will have a system, we will have functions and features in place, and the system we will work and operate in an efficient way. Yeah, mainly this is it. In essence, what we see is that economy definitely is giving is given a boost through smart metering, because the smart metering in essence is an infrastructure project, and whenever the country invests in its infrastructure, this means an improved standard in the country.
Okay, Klemen. Thank you very much. Interesting opinion. Daniel, would you continue?
Yeah, I think smart metering has a real opportunity to enable and increase energy access, especially in underserved regions or areas in Africa. Mostly these are rural areas where there's still low access rates, and it's quite expensive for utilities to provide reticulate power to these areas. I think again, it's important that the area of smart metering, where the recovery of the cost of the generated power happens, is really leveraged and looked into as enabling energy access, because whatever inhibits utilities from serving these areas is at the end of the day cost. So as we talked about cost standards and balancing all that, as that right balance is established, it becomes a very good driver for enabling access, and sustainably so, because it's two-way. One is for the utility to be able to provide the most flexible way of payment, and two is it reduces the pressure, especially even on the final consumer, in terms of how they pay. For instance, in prepaid systems that we've seen Kenya Power implement through the M-Pesa or mobile money integration, where they come with a meter at zero cost, and the cost of the meter is recovered over the lifetime over a certain period through the tariff. I think those are very good examples of how balancing these kinds of available avenues for supporting flexibility in terms of payment by the customer within an affordable range, because affordability is one big issue in these areas, and the cost of the sensitivity, the cost of technology as a meter itself is quite important to be considered. So yeah, there's that opportunity. The utilities also, as they become guaranteed that as they provide power, they're able to recover their cost. Then, and as they recover their cost and reduce on their commercial losses or technical losses, it eases them, or gives that opportunity to reinvest this money in now enhancing or supporting existing infrastructure, or even performing further expansions and providing more power to like a bigger, like a larger portion of populations. I think also the private sector, which is very keen and sensitive to risks of payment, would leverage smart metering because it gives some level of assurance on payment. And two, also it enables them to provide power in different combinations and flexibility, because if there's a smart meter with the capability to do load limiting, and I can deploy a small mini grid that can serve many people, and I'm able to balance that to support many people, then I'm able to use the lowest cost investment to provide power, and it's enabled by that device. So if you look at that, there's multiple ways you could view it and see the opportunity that smart meters really offers to enable increased access in rural areas, especially remote areas. Yeah.
Okay, Daniel. Shawn, what is your opinion on this question?
Yeah, no, I think some of the points Daniel raised are very important. The smart metering itself as a technology, I think will give us a lot of visualization into those networks, and that in turn will improve hopefully the operational efficiency of that utility, and possibly reduce the amount of money required to run the utility. And I'm hoping that will also benefit the end customer who's paying for that the providing that service becomes cheaper, and then hopefully the tariffs will also reflect that. The other thing is that most of the tariffs that we have nowadays are not reflective of the cost. And it's not because of something, whether people are trying to rob the customer, but it's mainly because there wasn't sufficient data at the customer level to monitor the consumption of energy on that. So I think the more realistic the consumption patterns are, and then we can be able to correlate that with the cost for generating and actually delivering that energy to the customer. Rolling out smart meters itself, a new project, I think will increase access, as Klemen mentioned earlier, that it's by nature, it is an infrastructure project, and that gives an opportunity for us to expand our grids. But for me, it's if we can achieve operational efficiency, I think that would be very beneficial for the end customer in ensuring that we lower the operational cost of utilities, and hopefully eventually that is to the benefit of the customer itself.
Okay, thank you, Shawn.
Yeah.
Okay, and we have some questions from the audience. One question is, what is the general penetration in percent or percentage of smart meters on the African continent? I don't know, do we have that data, and which countries are front runners? But I think that we mentioned in the interview, but if anyone from you want to add something, can.
Okay.
And second question is, how do we build bridge in Africa between the standard prepayment to smart meters? What would be the driver, knowing that prepayment works in Africa? I think question is about that transition period from smart meters, from prepayment meters to connected smart meters.
Yeah, if I can start, if you give me the chance, I think the current penetration of smart metering in percentage, I would not like to give the exact number, but I would, let's say, that it's fairly low. We have a lot of still standalone prepaid meters, but there's a clear evolutional path, and I see we will see in the next 3 years quite progressing evolution into smart metering. And is it going to be a classical smart meter or the prepaid connected meter? It doesn't really matter. There's a way of coexistence of both of them, and the one of maybe an examples is in Egypt. In Egypt, we have smart card prepaid meters. A huge portion, the governmental part is taking this, but at the same time, they are now running also the smart metering pilots, where they have the pilot based on the best practices coming from Europe, and the end result is the same. Just the ways or the means of how you bill the consumed energy is a bit different.
Okay, thanks, Klemen.
Yeah.
Shawn and Daniel, if you want to add something or...
Yeah. Look, I don't think we've got the smart metering projects well documented across the continent. Maybe in Daniel's space, he might know better than me. But just from interacting with colleagues within AFSEC, I don't think we have a well-documented record of projects that are ongoing in Africa at this point in time. And my fear is that if we state a percentage, we might be understating because I think the trend is moving mainly towards smart metering at this point in time. It's the same for the question on which countries are leading. I'm from South Africa. I know that we are doing a lot in that space. But someone from Nigeria may tell me that they are building factories there to deliver smart meters. Egypt is, as well, is also doing a lot in that space, as Klemen has mentioned. Even more Western countries, Rwanda, there's a number of projects that are ongoing. I think what one would want to do is at some point try and get these consolidated and get a picture of what's happening on the continent. Maybe a research project proposal, maybe something of that nature. And then in terms of the third question of how do we bridge between standard prepayment to smart meters, for me, at least in my mind, a smart meter should have both prepayment and postpaid functionality. Because in my experience, you never only have prepayment customers as a utility. You have a number of tariff products that you provide your customer, and these could be postpaid and could be prepaid. So for me, the meter must be capable to switch between the two out of the box. So that at any point where you see the postpaid is more feasible than prepaid, you go for that. If prepayment is more feasible, then you just switch without having to uninstall that meter and restart your project. I think from the onset, if we can find an innovative, cost-effective way to have both options built into one meter, and that meter being capable to be remotely switched between the two payment modes, in the same way that today you can remotely program tariffs, multi-part tariffs in a meter. I think that would be quite beneficial and would be, to some extent, future-proof. And then even for your field metering technicians, they don't have to master either prepayment or postpayment. They learn everything that the meter is capable of once off. And I think in that way, it will be efficient. So even if on the onset, you deploy your meters, your smart meters with existing tariffs, and in future, you give the customers an incentive to change to prepayment, you could simply just switch over without having to reinstall or incurring costs of starting a project from scratch. That's my view.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and if I may add to this, with the very fact that the postpaid or prepaid meter is becoming connected, also the product will become one product. There will be no need for the built-in keypad or split keypad or card reader in the meter, because the prepayment will also happen on the line connected to the vending system, and there will be no longer need to get the bill, put the code in locally in the place. So indeed, the meter will have both functionalities supported. By the way, this is the case already in this new pilot in Egypt, and the meter can be connected as a postpaid meter or a prepaid meter. It's already the case.
Okay, thank you. And we have one more question for Klemen. What is one thing that Klemen would highlight from the experience of massive meter installations in Europe that would be particularly useful for smart metering rollouts in Africa? One thing you...
I think I already mentioned this thing. For me, what I've learned across the projects in Europe is that always try to understand what the others are doing. Don't go your own path if there is not a really good reason for it. Because if you deviate from the mainstream, this sooner or later will have to result in or either a proprietary product for you, or you will not be supported over the course of a time, or you will not be able to advance to the new technology because there will be a clear dead end on the side of your technology you are currently using. So yeah, try to understand what the others are doing, because this is usually the best way how to set grounds for your smart metering rollout.
Okay, and questions for Shawn and Daniel. Klemen mentioned that different communication technology is needed for only if a smart metering system only collects billing data from one side, or if smart metering system enable real-time data from the other side. So what do you think, how important is for distribution companies in Africa to have real-time data for implementing different tariff system or including distributed energy generation into energy network? Shawn and Daniel.
I think it's very important, Jovan. I think Daniel, you can add. For me, the most important thing with real-time data is operational efficiency. I think it was Daniel who mentioned that we already struggle with OPEX. So if the availability of data will enable us to be more efficient the way that we operate our businesses, I think that will enable us to really drop the operational costs. So for me, in that, not necessarily for the customers to have, only the customers to have consumption data, but for the distribution system operators to understand their own networks, to quickly pick up faults, and in some cases to even correct those faults remotely using smart meters. I think that will help us quite a lot. In terms of tariffs, the more data that we have, the more it would be feasible for us to look at other ways of pricing. And I think that the lack of data at the low voltage network level, at the customer level, also takes away the confidence to explore other pricing models. But I think the more we are informed about what's happening there and what the consumption patterns are, one can always then explore different tariffs based on the real-time data that's coming through. So I know connectivity is always a problem, but I think for me, as much data as you can get will help you to make the correct business decisions. So that's quite important in my mind. We've had a lot of instability in our grids in recent years. And a lot of customers have invested in rooftop photovoltaic systems, at least in our market. The utilities are looking for a way on how to legitimize those installations and also how to enable those customers to sell back some of that energy into the grid to support energy availability going forward. So the smart metering technology will also enable us to implement tariffs that will accommodate those type of installations and also be able to monitor the power flows where we have those PVs installed as well. So yeah, I think it's very important that from the onset we include those requirements in the smart metering systems that we deploy.
Okay. So real-time data. Daniel, do you agree? Do you have to add anything?
Yeah, I think I completely agree that having that visibility, especially for those some of the last mile connectivities that are being rolled out by different rural agencies and different utilities and different private developers is critical because it provides what Shawn has talked about, like data that is, and not just data, but within data that can offer insights on different elements of operational efficiency. We have seen a lot of cases or instances where, in terms of deployment, it's based on estimations, and it comes and sometimes inaccurate estimations of load requirements. And you find that there's cases where you find transformers or lines that are underloaded or overloaded, which introduces efficiency issues. So having smart metering devices, both at the customer level and even maybe branch level metering, enables utilities to be able to have that clear visibility of load flows and be able to provide the right interventions if one line is overloaded, instead of it breaking down and having to send a whole truck or having the entire community down. You are able to have that insight real time is really critical and very important and valuable information to have. It enables them to offer like better service as well, and in terms of response, because you have visibility of what is going on in those low voltage connection points. It also enables that ability to be able to offer multiple tariff settings. I think there was that connection that's been created around how can you incentivize within, because the success of electrification is also about how do you incentivize utilization of that electricity beyond the basic access level or the low tier access towards income generating activities. I think there's a lot of conversations around catalyzing productive use of energy. Utilities are keen to see like what are the utilization patterns and habits of consumers, and how can we encourage them to, if it's an agricultural setting, for instance, how can you encourage uptake of something that would increase load consumption or drive some commercial sense of it, so that there's that element of sustainability. And all these data and insights can only come from smart metering systems. So it's important. It's as real time as it can be, and also offering utilities an opportunity to improve on the operational efficiency and support customers to be able to gain value from the access they have. I think that is important as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think that we come to the end of this webinar. So I think that we have had an excellent discussion today. Maybe I can mention a few conclusions. it seems that the implementation of smart metering in Africa is gaining momentum. Accelerating large-scale smart metering rollouts in Africa requires close collaboration among governments, utilities, and international partners, leveraging public-private partnerships and donor support to address financial and technical barriers. Also, adopting international standards with modifications such as prepayment features can enhance local adoption while contributing to global innovation in smart metering. Financial and technical partnerships play a crucial role in scaling projects and ensuring technology transfer. And ultimately, connected smart meters promise to enhance energy access and affordability, providing real-time data for utilities and enabling flexible payment systems that benefit customers in African communities. I expect that we will continue this discussion on ENIT conference next year in Africa. And at the end, I would like to thanks to Mr. Bungey, Mr. Papi, and Mr. Belec, and thank you to the audience. And let's shape the future together.
Thank you very much for having me here, and I was enjoying the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Jovan. It was really a great conversation and discussion. Looking forward to further deliberations on this topic.
Thank you, Jovan. Thanks, colleagues. I think it was a great opportunity just to reflect on the African continent. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to everybody.